guys, it's Pastor Ken here. Just want to share with you another devotional thought. Maybe we could pray together at the end of this video. But it's Wednesday of Holy Week, and we've been doing a series on the different days of Holy Week as they're recorded in the Gospels. And on Wednesday, what happens is Jesus is at the house of Simon the leper, and a woman comes to him, and she has a jar of costly perfume, and she breaks it open, she pours it all over Jesus and anoints him. And some people are terribly offended that this has happened. It's like, wow, all this money could have been spent or invested in a whole bunch of other things, and this is just what an extravagant waste of expensive perfume. And this is what Jesus says in response to this woman's worship and the complaints that go on about it. So this is from Mark chapter 14 and reading from verse 6. And so a lot of people are rebuking this woman, and Jesus says in verse 6, "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you'll always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you'll not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." And it goes on to say that at this moment, Judas Iscariot goes to betray Jesus. And what do I want to encourage us with from this passage? Even with all the stuff that's happening in our lives, and it's crazy what's happening. I think back to 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the world was a different place. It's actually crazy what's happening in the world. And with all the stuff that's going on, you know what's important? Worshipping Jesus is still important. Worshipping Jesus and giving to Jesus what is due to him. And I suppose even being extravagant in the way that we respond to him. This Holy Week, we remember what Jesus did for us. And in this story that we read on Wednesday of Holy Week, this woman, she didn't know necessarily that Jesus was going to be executed on Good Friday, but what she did, she loved Jesus. And as an overflow of that love, she invested heavily and expensively because Jesus is worthy. So worship is important. I want us to encourage that, even with all the distractions that are going on. And let's continue to worship Jesus. That's singing, that's praying to him, that's just talking to him about how we feel about him, being in a relationship with him. That's doing things in his name. There's a whole bunch of ways that we can worship Jesus. It's not just singing, but that's obviously a part of it as well. So worship is important, and even in the face of opposition, this woman had to overcome resistance. People didn't want her to worship Jesus the way that she was. And so, sometimes a lot of that resistance that we feel these days is how we feel, our own internal resistance. I'm too tired. I don't want to do this. I've got other things I could be doing. Well, you know what? Let's worship Jesus even in the face of opposition. Oh, the whole world's going to hell in a handbasket. Well, let's worship Jesus even in the face of opposition. And let's not make it cheap worship either. Worship is costly. Worship's meant to we're not meant to just with the leftovers of our lives worship Jesus. We're actually meant to worship him with the core of who we are, with what costs us. And so worship is meant to be costly. Because it's important, it's also remembered. This is what Jesus says. He says, "Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her." Our worship of Jesus, when there's opposition, our worship of Jesus when it's costly, our worship of Jesus because it's important, our worship is going to be remembered. God remembers our worship. So I want to encourage you, this Holy Week, let's worship Jesus. He really is worthy. And look what he does on Good Friday. Look what happens on Easter Sunday. Jesus is worthy of our worship. So I just wanted to encourage you with that, and maybe we can pray into that right now. Jesus, I thank you. That's my declaration. I suppose it's the way I live my life, is that you're worthy. You're worthy of my worship. You're worthy of me doing whatever it takes to worship you. You're worthy of me to do whatever it takes to be obedient to the call that you've put on my life. And I pray, Lord, that you'd help us all to live in that space, that we would remember that you're worthy, that you're the King who laid down his life for his rebellious subjects. I was your rebellious subject. I was a traitor to you, but you forgave me and you paid my price that I should have paid. You died instead of me, and I thank you for that, Jesus. And I'll give you everything. And I just pray, Lord, that even when it's hard, I'll still give you everything. And I thank you, Lord, that you'd help us all to do that. Lord, even when we're distracted by what's happening in the world, even when there's opposition, God, internal and external opposition, even when it costs us everything, Lord, I pray that you'd help us to worship you. And I pray that we would be encouraged that you remember our worship, that our worship is a testimony not only to ourselves, not only to the people around us, but to all of creation, and you remember our worship. So Lord, I just pray that you would be with us in this season and help us just to look to you and to give you what you deserve, which is all of us. And in your name I pray, Jesus. Amen. Well guys, I hope that was encouraging, and as always, be blessed.